Monster RX93.1. Join in, hear it out. Heard on Thursdays. Be part of the conversation. Intelligent and fun exchange of information. It's you and Nikki and our special guests on air and online. HOT.
Good evening, Monsters. Welcome to the show that made Philippine FM radio talk. That is Heard on Thursdays on the Monster. This is your host, of course, Nikki Porter.
Heard on Thursdays, 10 to 11 p.m. A weekly Monster special like no other. From Manila's hottest, Monster RX93.1.
Monster RX93.1 presents Heard on Thursdays. Hot conversations on hot topics. Your host, Nikki Porter.
Hey Monsters, good evening and welcome to the show that made Philippine FM radio talk, and that's Heard on Thursdays exclusively on the Monster. I'm your host this evening, Nikki Porter. Tonight marks the return of HOT to the 10 to 11 p.m. time slot. So don't be surprised that you're hearing this an hour earlier than usual. And maybe it's good timing as well to start off the new year back to the original schedule in which Heard on Thursdays was in. Anyway, we have officially crossed the halfway mark of January. So how are your New Year's resolutions coming along? Remember when you claimed at the start of the year that, 2025 is the year that you will start probably being more financially responsible and being responsible in other areas as well. And I know many of us are still recovering from all the holiday spending, especially. So hopefully you're still on the right track. The thing is, being financially responsible isn't simply just about tightening your belt. And for many of us, it can be really hard to do even when we try and try again every single year. And tonight's guest will help us figure out what is blocking us. Joining us on the show is Nik Madriñan, a money mindset and life coach helping Filipino professionals fund their life milestones with one income stream at a time. Having built a 1 million peso net worth and a 7-figure business, she believes that mastering your money mindset is the foundational skill for building sustainable money habits and achieving your version of financial freedom. So Heard on Thursdays, let's welcome back to the show, Nik Madriñan. Hello!
Hey, Nikki, and also to everyone watching. I'm so excited to dive into everything because, as you said, it's the new year and there's some kind of vibes when it's New Year's. And we want to make sure we achieve all the things that we want to be.
Yeah, parang somewhat clean slate on how we want to start off the new year. Make things right from the previous year and previous years. All right, so let's start off with you being a money mindset coach. There's a money coach, there's a mindset coach, there's a money mindset coach, and everything else in between. So for you as a money mindset coach, what role does the mindset play in achieving long-term financial success? Like, how can someone shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset so that we can start making more money for ourselves?
Yes. So it's great that you point that out because we don't realize how foundational our money mindset really is in achieving our money goals, our financial goals in life. Because I realized that how you view yourself really bleeds into how you manage your money. Like how you perceive yourself reflects on your money decisions. So that's how I realized in my own experience that how I perceive my goals, that's also how I reflected it on my money decisions. So when it comes to the mindset, it's really about, in simplest terms, your thoughts and beliefs around money. Like, what are your thoughts and beliefs around money? Because more often than not, I'd say 90%, that's how your money decisions also look like. So for example, if you're like, I am so scared of, for example, I'm so scared of taking the leap for my dreams. Like, I'm scared I'm going to fail. I'm scared I'm not good enough for that dream. Guess what? Your money decisions would also look like, I don't want to start that business, or I don't want to start freelancing, or I don't want to use my savings to enroll in that course or to do my master's, because you're scared. You're scared that, are you capable enough? Are you competent enough? Are you enough to take the leap for what you want? And so that's what I mean, that your mindset is so integral, because your money mindset really mirrors your actions and decisions in life. And that's why I can't shut up about how your like major life milestones really involve a lot of crucial money decisions. So if we want to fund those life milestones, it really starts with, what are my thoughts and beliefs around money, and what are those things that hold me back because of those thoughts, and how can I start challenging them so that I can really create a more empowering belief about money, and therefore stick to those savings goals, stick to those financial goals I've set for myself, so that I therefore pursue the life milestones that I've always wanted for myself.
And I love that you started off with that, because tatamaan ako. Because it's so true. It's like, the way that you, like the mirroring of it, right? Like for you not being able to pursue what it is that you want is, really how you think about, how you want to handle your money as well. So you mentioned about this, like you said, it was also a matter of thinking about, like, what are the thoughts that are holding you back. And I guess let's go there first. Like, what are some common myths about money that hold people back from building wealth, and how can they debunk them, like, mentally? Because you can listen to like what the solution is or something, but how can we actually like imbibe it, like really take it in?
Yes, because it's true. Like, you could read or watch a lot of like money mantras, or like money manifestation things that you could listen to, or like watch YouTube videos about what you should believe in about money, or what you should believe about yourself. But I realized hearing about it and believing it are two different things. Like, you're like, I'm supposed to believe I am abundant. I'm supposed to believe I can manifest anything I want. But then deep down inside, subconsciously, you're like, no, you don't deserve that. Like, you think you can do that? Like, subconsciously, there is a part of our mind that's telling us, you can't really do that. That's not possible for you. And so when we talk about like what thoughts are those things that are blocking you, I think if I were to be super honest, I realized that it's really deep into like how we were conditioned growing up. And, going back to our Filipino culture, there are a lot of things that our parents told us, our grandparents told us, the past generations told us to believe, that we still believe to this day when they're outdated, when they're like toxic. So for example, a lot of, for example, my clients, let me give an example of like, oh, growing up, my parents said, if I take this course, walang pera dyan. Right? Or like, yung mga ganun na, if I take art, if I take history, if I take graphic design, yung mga ganun na. So what happened? They didn't take it. But then now growing up, they're like, wait, that is an outdated belief now. Like, that's not true. Like, just because they didn't do the thing I wanted doesn't mean walang pera doon. And so that's one of the things now we have to start questioning, like, what are those outdated beliefs that we thought were true, but we're actually just conditioned it to be true. And so I think it's so important that we look at, in terms of what thoughts are stopping us, look at where you are right now. So, for example, there's a certain thing that always has been at the back of your head. So, for example, I have this client who's like, I have to finish nursing. Like, I have to finish my nursing exam, etc., etc. And then I can tell she doesn't want it. She's just doing it because that's what her tita wants for her. And she knows that if she doesn't do it, she's going to get the disappointment. But in reality, what she really wanted to do was to be a language specialist. She wanted to be a voice actor and things like that. I'm like, wow, like, so all this time, you've been wasting time trying to please what the elders wanted for you, but you never really asked yourself, like, do I still want that? And so she realized that I've always wanted to do XYZ. So for example, I always wanted to pursue this career, but then I'm held back with the thought na, sabi nila baka walang pera dyan. Sabi nila baka punta ako doon sa may in-demand nursing, for for example. And so I want you to, wherever you are right now, what is that one thing that has always been at the back of your mind? And what is that one thing what is a one belief that's telling you, hindi possible yon, hindi yan para sa'yo? And I think it starts with that. It starts with what is the dream and what's the thought that's telling you it's not for you. I started with that also, like being where I am now, doing coaching, especially being a content creator. I had a lot of limiting beliefs about it, like, all the things I said, like, am I good enough for it? Am I competent enough? Do I have enough savings to quit my job and do this thing full time? And so those are the limiting beliefs that I had to face. I had to acknowledge so that therefore I can start thinking, saan nanggaling yon? Saan nanggaling yung belief na yon? And is it true? Or is there a way for me to challenge it and reframe it so that I could feel more empowered to take action on using my money as a tool to fund the dreams that I've always wanted for myself.
And it's really important that you really brought up, it's saying that it was like what we were raised in, believing what money was about, where we can find money and how we can earn money, and we're really seeing the impact as well of like just living up to someone else's standards instead of our own, and us being like, yes, maybe we are making money, but then like we're not so fulfilled in what we are doing, or it's just not the way that we pictured our life to be. And so for those who are afraid of making those financial mistakes, and they want to be a little bit more, take more calculated risks with their money in 2025 that benefits them, how can they overcome that fear?
That fear is very familiar to me, as I mentioned, like to connect to what I said earlier. I had a lot of fears around taking risks because for the longest time I was in corporate. So for example, like in my experience, that's what I've known. That's what's familiar to me. Yun yung nakasanayan. And diba growing up, we gravitate towards, yun yung nakasanayan eh. You stick with it because it's safe. It's comfortable. It gives you stability, right? And I had to, I think number one is really face like that fear, because oftentimes you just shrug it like, hindi, lalang yon. I just need to save. Like we think that we can just shrug it off and just save. But then the thing is, there will be a lot of blockers. Like, for instance, for me, I did save, but I was scared to use it. So parang, so I'm scared because I was so attached to that amount of savings na I'm still scared to take the risk. So we think the misconception is like, I just need to have a lot of savings and then I'll use it to fund what I want, but it's not true. It really starts with, first, as I mentioned, like acknowledging that fear, where it's coming from. And then second, doon mo lang marirealize that, okay, now I'm saving purposefully towards what I really want. And so going back to the financial mistakes is that I think that's what, that's the misconception is like, now when I have savings, I won't be anxious anymore. I thought once I have savings, I won't be anxious anymore. And I have a lot of clients who come to me like, I have 6-figure savings. I still am scared. I'm so anxious. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to travel. I don't want to do this and that. I'm so anxious. So that's why I believe that you have to start off first with what's the root cause of that anxiety? What's the root cause of that guilt? What's the root cause of those fears? And then from there, will it be easier for you to save consistently and therefore use your savings purposefully towards your life goals talaga? Because I realized that it has to go hand in hand, the mindset and the money management. Syempre, di lang puro mindset na I believe in myself, right?
Yeah.
But then parang wala namang strategic or like practical ways to manage your money. So it has to go hand in hand. In the same way, hindi lang siya pwedeng just, I'll just do the 50-30-20 method and then I'll fake it till I make it. I'll just believe in myself. Ganyan. But it's not that. So that's why I believe that if you want to be truly financially free, it's 90% overcoming those limiting beliefs around money and 10% money management. Like it can't be just one. It has to go hand in hand.
Okay. And so now, like, what are some of the how look no actually like how do you recommend then for someone who is managing the fears around money, and like how they can now set financial goals that feel motivating, that feel achievable, and that they won't feel overwhelmed, because sometimes, right, it's like at the start of the year making resolutions. I want to save 100K by the end of this year, diba? So that big, like it can, with that number or even with that goal, it can seem like such a high summit for some to reach. So for you, like what would you recommend, like how to go about these financial goals, especially at the start of this year?
Yes. So how I coach my clients is for them to focus on what is your desired outcome from having those savings. What is your intention behind having those savings? Like, what is going to be the positive outcome when you have it? So it's not so much as like 100K, 1 million, para saan? Because I've seen it na you save that much and then you're like, hindi ko naman alam kung para saan, gastusin ko na lang. Or di ko naman alam kung para saan, itabi ko na lang. And so what happens is you become so attached nga to money that you don't end up using it to empower you. And so when you set financial goals, I'd say it has to be intertwined with your deepest desires and dreams. So for example, say I'm going to save X amount of capital to start my dream Airbnb business, something like that. So it has to be so specific to you. And another example could be like, let's say, prepare X amount down payment for my dream house and lot by X date. So it has to be tailored to you and not just like a generic amount. In that way, it excites you. It empowers you. Oh, so when I do this consistently, I'm going to see this. Like I can visualize that I'm going to get there. So in the same way, like when my clients have debts, I don't tell them like I don't allow them, or I don't let them focus on, I'm going to clear my debts this year. Because the thing is, they focus on the negative connotation of debts. Like, syempre pag clear debts, di naman exciting yun eh. Burdensome pa nga, I have to do this. So I ask them, what's the positive outcome when you clear those debts? Like, what opportunities will open up? And so let's say they say, I'll finally be able to pivot in my career. Instead of this, I'm gonna go here. Or after I clear my debts, I'm gonna be able to travel with my family. Or after I clear my debts, I'll finally be able to start content because I can buy equipment to do more content stuff or do freelancing. So that's how I want to encourage everyone to set their goals, is what are the rewarding milestones that will lead you to actualizing your dream life? And how can money serve as a tool lang, not as the end goal? Because ultimately, we only want money because of what it will give us. Right? Di naman, kung may 1 million ka dyan, di mo naman mahawakan, edi para saan? Diba?
Yeah.
So that's how I'd like, even for me when I set my goals all the time, I think about what is the end desire that I get to have, that I get to experience because I saved this or because I fixed my finances to be this way.
Okay. It's actually really a good point, because a lot of us, again, it's like, just earn or save up this much, period, full stop, that's it, by the end of this year. It's so much more meaningful if you actually put meaning into why you want to save that X amount of money. And so that's super helpful. And I'm like, I was honestly looking for a pen. I need to write this down because it's really just like, because it's so true. Like, our parents, our grandparents, they would tell us to save money, but they don't tell us to save money for our future, but what in our future, right? So this one is actually doing ourselves a favor to really, save up for our future, but specifically in bullet points, I guess, with the X.
I wanna add on to that, just because it came up for me that actually most of the time the biggest blocker also when setting those goals is, at least from what I've seen in my clients, is they don't even know what they want. They don't even know what it's for. because all
Yeah.
their lives it was dictated to them. It was
Yes.
dictated, you should do this, you should have a property by this age, you should have a family by this age, you should get married by this age, and you're like, what the hell do I want? And so that's why I believe that it has to go hand in hand. You need to figure out what you want out of life first so that it becomes easier and exciting to save up for it. And it doesn't become just a blind thing because you have to.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It's like opening up like your savings account or putting up like some investment so that you can have money. And but then it's like you have money already that's growing, but then you like, especially with growing up with that kind of mentality, like you mentioned earlier with your clients, like they don't even want to touch it because it's like that's kind of like a safety net, but at the same time it's like it's hindering them from actually wanting to achieve their dreams or what their desires, what they've always wanted to do. And so for those with who get a little bit emotional, get a little sensitive when it comes to like budgeting, diba? Because sometimes it's so hard. Like we try and weigh in whatever it is that we need to spend for monthly, month to month. So for those who deal with like guilt, anxiety around money, how do you help them deal with that aspect, the emotional aspect when it comes to budgeting or managing your finances?
I was thinking of like, what is the most common denominator when it comes to guilt and anxiety? Because I'm thinking of like my clients, like what allowed them to be at that point, and the emotional side of it is like, I'm gonna get deep because I always get deep, which is that I realized that your guilt and anxiety around money often stems from unmet needs from childhood. Always. Most of the time, it's always that. So, for example, like as a child, you never felt heard and seen, or your desires were always like, we cannot afford that, or like, we can do that. And so, growing up, you're like, I'm going to buy everything I want because I was neglected, I was abandoned, I was not heard as a child. And so, you mask it as like healing my inner child, when in reality, you're not serving your inner child. You just need to listen their inner child. Ano ba talaga yung real desires niya? Ano yung totoo? Because most of the time, we just create an illusion of what we think we want, but it's actually not that. And so another unmet need could be like that your feelings were never acknowledged or like were never understood. Na, for example, when an example of one of my clients would be like, when she was, for example, forced to do like public speaking as a child. And she said she doesn't want that, but she couldn't speak up because sinabihan siya ng nanay niya na, you have to do it, right? Because it's a very Filipino thing. You just follow your parents. And so now growing up, she's a breadwinner and she can say nothing. She can say, I can't do it anymore. I'm wala nang natitira sa akin. She can't say it. She can't be honest with the people around her because growing up, she was never taught to be honest with her feelings. She was never taught to acknowledge what she's really going through and what she really wants. And so that's oftentimes like that's the root cause that I see when it comes to the emotional side of money, is that it goes way, way, way deeper in terms of what were those unmet needs and desires as a child that now bleed into how you spend and how you manage money now as an adult.
Yeah, and that's so true. Like, and I hate that it always has to tie back to childhood. Like all of these
I know,
fears
right?
and everything.
I always like to be honest and give some tough love that there is no perfect budgeting method. There is no perfect, like, you just need to magically follow this and you're going to be magically financially responsible and financially confident. Because one thing that I mentioned is that I realized kasi when you're able to overcome those like limiting beliefs around money, my clients realize it's so easy pala to do my finances. Like it's so easy pala. I've been overcomplicating it pala. So most of the time, the reason why people can stick to their budget is because they're overcomplicating it. They think they need to have all of these spy graphs and all of these apps and all of these templates when it could be really so simple. Like I know like they're gonna hate me for this, but that's what they tell me. Like my clients are like, wait, it could be this simple pala, coach. Like I've been making it so hard on myself because most of the time the limiting belief is also like, in order for it to be effective, it needs to be hard. In order for it to work, it needs to take so much time and effort, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so if I were to put it in the most simplest terms, the most effective way to budget is like throw away all of the shoulds, like you should be saving this much, you should be having this much by this age. Instead, look at what is my life stage and how can I match my finances to that. So for example, how a client of mine who is in her early 20s versus a client of mine who is a single mom with 3 kids would have a different budgeting style.
Right.
So how I guide them is like, how can they tailor fit the percentage of savings that they would need based on their life goals and life stage. So babalik tayo dun sa kanina na parang, if you don't know what you want, kalat yan. You're like, dapat may property na ako. Dapat may business na ako. Dapat may wedding fund na ako kahit wala pa akong partner. Mga ganun na all of a sudden, you're gonna spread your resources too thin and it's not gonna feel exciting. It's gonna feel frustrating, stressful. And so, when you're clear on your life goals and your life stage, it's gonna be easier to know na, okay, then I am gonna save 30%, 50%, whatever it is. Kasi I have clients who are like, I don't want to move out. I'm okay with living with my parents. So they can save 50% of their income towards their life goals, like what they really want. But then I have another client who's a breadwinner who's like, okay, now that I've learned how to set those boundaries and acknowledge my feelings, acknowledge what I want to the people around me, I can now save this much. It's not going to be as big as someone who's still with her parents or things like that. So that's what whenever someone asks me something about like this, I'm like, you have to start with how can you tailor fit your budgeting to your life stage and life goals so that you also don't get distracted by what other people are saying. Na parang, kailangan meron ka ng this much savings, kailangan save 50%. Wait lang, madami akong ganyan, ganito, diba? And so, it has to start within talaga. Like, what do you truly want? And how can you align the savings that would be achievable to get to what you want?
Okay. And so one of the popular budgeting methods that was popularized or developed by, I think, US Senator Elizabeth Warren was the 50-30-20. So is that something that, people can start off with and then maybe adjust the percentages according to their own needs? Or what is your take on that budgeting scheme?
My personal philosophy and also like how my clients realize when they come to me, they've tried it. They've tried the 70-20-10, the 50-30-20, and they're like, it's not working. Like, it's really not. And I also tried it in the past. And I realized because it's very restricting. Like, you could follow that, and then kapag lumampas ka lang ng konti, you feel bad. And when you feel bad, you're like, wag na lang. Yung gano'n na when you just fail, you're like, wag na lang. Let me just do that next year ulit. And then pagka February na, wala na, diba? So, and so in terms of what they can start off with that I feel like could be tangible is what is a monthly target savings commitment that they can sustain in 6 months. So for example, if it's 10,000 for 6 months, great. Instead of, let me push myself to do 30%, pero ide-deprive mo naman yung sarili mo, you won't be able to enjoy, hindi ka makalabas ng bahay, hindi ka makabili ng coffee na gusto mo, yung mga ganun na, and in the end kasi, if you deprive, you're gonna relapse. Tell me how I know, because that's how I was. and so that's why I believe na you have at least start off with what is an easy, sustainable or monthly commitment that you can save. Start off with that in 6 months, and then when it feels like ang dali lang pala nito, then you increase slowly. Instead of let me push myself to save 30%. Tapos when you don't stick to it, you're gonna feel bad, you're gonna feel demotivated and give up. So I always believe in that is like how can you make it a sustainable habit instead of a punishing punishment of like dapat may savings ka na so you should do this.
Right.
And so because when you make it sustainable, then it becomes a skill. When it becomes a skill, then it's gonna really be that foundation for you to manage your money properly, and therefore feel like you're unstoppable because you could fund any life goal na in the future and now.
Okay. So no particular budgeting method, but just what suits you. Do we still have to rely on percentages or not necessarily?
I feel like no. Like that's my hot take. Like I always talked about this on my TikTok. Like people who watch me on TikTok, they're like, wait, what? I don't need to do daily expense tracking, and I don't need to like follow the 70-20-10 or the 50-30-20. I mean they could try. But then I'll say it doesn't work out in the long run. So I'm gonna save you the trouble and the time and effort that it doesn't. It's easier to just focus on what is a monthly commitment, savings commitment. And then, yung the rest ng money na hindi mo sasave, how can you align that with your life stage and life goals? So, babalik tayo doon. Because even for me, how I saved 2 years ago and how I save now is so different. Because 2 years ago, I didn't have a husband. I didn't have a property I'm paying for. Now I live with my husband and I have a property I'm paying for. And I have like bigger travel goals. And so, you have to build that skill of knowing how to adjust your finances based on your life goals talaga. So if you don't have life goals, it's easy to get overwhelmed with how to manage your finances. Because I realized like if you have no clear direction in your life, you also don't know where your money is going.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think to add to that, I did try also the 50-30-20 once, and I was like, no, it's just too hard. Like I literally like would not be able to spend on myself, like especially, and I really was trying to choose what to spend on. Even so, when I was doing that, it was just like to move that margin just a little bit. Yeah, like I understand the guilt to just try and meet that percentage. So like yes, I guess it would be less limiting to have to work without it. But you mentioned also life stages. So could you elaborate a little bit like what you mean by life stages for those who might not understand?
Yes. So life stage could be like, let me put myself as an example. So let's say my life stage 4 years ago was I was in my corporate job, I was living on my own, and I really wanted to quit and start my business. So like that was my life stage. And therefore, my priorities would be different. My priority then was I need to be ready with my savings so I could quit my job. Like that's it. Like that's where I was. And now my life stage is I'm already doing this for years full time. And now I live with my husband. So iba na yung priorities. I have a cat. Oh my gosh, I didn't have a cat 4 years ago. So alam mo, iba yung life stage in a way that how much I saved then was different. I was saving for an emergency fund then. Now I'm saving for the property lump sum that we need in a few years' time. I'm saving up for my 30th birthday travel goal that I have this year. And so another example could be like someone who's I love this now that I realize like the life stages, because I have clients where we were at a certain life stage and then they come back for coaching 2 years later and they're at a different life stage and they're like, Coach, oh my gosh, iba na yung life stage ko, I need to adjust my finances. So you can't expect talaga na how you did it before is gonna be the same because your life stage shifts. So for example, I have one client who just moved out on her own like a few years ago. And now she moved out to another property with her husband na. So now she's like navigating the dynamics of having a partner versus before mag-isa lang siya, iba yung gastusin mo nun, iba priorities mo nun. Or like the life stage of like, kayo, mag-husband pa lang kayo, but eventually, when you have kids, then the life stage is gonna be different. Mag-iiba yung priorities. And so, it's important to identify the life stage because that's when you're gonna know what your priorities are. And when you know your priorities, that's gonna be your blueprint on how will I spend? How much should I save? How much is enough for me and my other responsibilities?
Okay. All right. And that makes a lot of sense. Like it does actually change as life goes on, as you reach different stages, hence life stage. So now we've talked about like, budgeting with a specific goal in mind. And now like, how can we make a budget this time that's flexible and also manageable to accommodate, the emergencies, right? The unexpected expenses. How do we accommodate for that? How much can we or should we put on the side just in case something like that happens, an emergency, something unexpected, etc.
Yes, I love this because like beyond that it's tailor fit, it's something that I sit down with my clients like we need to audit like where's your financial standing right now. So backtrack. So after we go through like okay, we acknowledge the fears, the limiting beliefs that holds you back from your life goals, and now that you have huge self-belief na kaya ko pala yung goals ko, like I can see myself achieving it, then we get into okay, where are you now with your finances? So we do like a financial audit of, okay, this is your income. What's the best way now? What's the most optimal way for you to allocate your income, your one income? And then from there, I help them create literally a 15-minute financial system. This is where they tell me, oh my gosh, coach, ang dali lang pala. Pinapahirap ako sa sarili ko all my life to force myself, to restrict myself, ganyan. And so that's where I guide them in, okay, in 15 minutes, how can you feel confident na this is how much I'm going to save, this is how much I can freely spend without feeling guilty, and this is how I can, for example, like clear my debts or like pay off responsibilities that I have to every month. And so it has to be like looking at where are you now and what needs to be improved. What do you want to do differently based on how you were emotional with yung mga emotionally charged purchases, ganyan, or yung mga mistakes. You need to acknowledge that kasi like I realized na you can solve something if you don't see it as a problem. Like what are you gonna solve if you don't see it as a problem? And so that's why I sit down with my clients and really like audit what would you like to do differently? And I want it to come from them, not from me. I wanted to be like, oh, because I had this limiting belief, this is how I spend. Because I didn't believe in my goals, this is where my money went towards instead. Instant gratification, ganyan. And so once they realized what are those purchases or allocation of funds that don't serve them, then it's going to be easier to now, okay, how can we create a better financial system that's going to serve your goals talaga? That's gonna be more sustainable for you to stick to, and that feels easy and exciting for you to do every month.
Okay. So again, this isn't something that has a specific like formula or percentage. It's really just what suits them, like suits specifically the person who's asking. So now, like in terms of yung mga, because we were built on, you mentioned this before, like, with a single income stream. And I've actually seen your newsletters, okay, that is, trying to encourage people to, save up for their goals with one income stream. But we were also built on hustle culture. A lot of us have something else on the side so that we could try and make ends meet. So in what ways then should a person's financial planning change? Like if they anticipate, more, gigs on the side, more freelance work, more hustle in 2025?
Yes. So I love talking about how you could be financially free with one income stream if you're built on sustainable money habits and systems. Because again, I go back to like clients who come to me and like, I have so many, like I'm earning six figures and I have so many side hustles, income streams, but I still feel like wala pa rin ako naipundar. Or I feel like I'm still so anxious. I'm still financially insecure. And ultimately, it's because they focus more on earning more instead of what do they truly want out of that. So what happens is so how I see it, it's like this cycle of like, I need to earn more. And because you don't know what it's for, you just end up spending blindly or saving blindly. And so because you keep doing it blindly, you're like, oh, kulang. I need to earn more again. And then you earn more again. And then you're like, wait, I'm in this hustle mindset na of like, I need to work 24/7 in order to be financially free. When in reality, instead of starting with, I need to earn more, what are you earning for? Like, what is that? Like, what is that life that would allow you to get there? And so, because my clients realize that when they have that safe space to talk about their goals, desires, and dreams, they realize it becomes so simple. I'm like, all these things na parang mga budol or like expectations of others or like pressures of society, when I started stripping those away, I get deep into my core of what I really want. And when they get clear on that, they're like, this is how much income I need. This is how much I need to save. And this is when I will get there. Like we just go through that step by step. And so that's why when it comes to like the hustle culture, it becomes like that cycle because ultimately you just keep following everyone's benchmark of success. Instead of, wait, let me pause and check, do I even want that? Like, what's my benchmark of success? My analogy there is like, literally, like this is one of the things that came out from a coaching call with my client na she thought that she wanted to work abroad. Like she thought that that's where she's gonna be in the next 10 years. And then she realized na I've just been driving to move forward when I don't even know where I'm going towards. Like I haven't even checked in and like, can I just stop and look outside the window? Do I even want to be here? Do I even like where this is going? Or do I just keep driving for the sake of I'm moving and I'm moving forward? But is it to a direction that you really want? Or is it just to please the society's benchmark of success? And so that's what I believe. And that's why when it goes down to the simplest, purest form of what you want, my clients realize it becomes so simple. Like, I just need one income stream. It's enough. I remember one of these things that a client said na, I have enough income if I know where my priorities are, if I know where my goals are. And because there's no more distractions and there's no more pressures from people around you, from society on what you should want. Instead, you're like, ito yung gusto ko eh. Ito yung nagastos ako. Ito yung pag-iipunan ko. And everything else just becomes noise.
I love that. And that resonated also with me. It's like, again, it's like you're doing so much. And especially with hustle culture, like we are encouraged to like, oh, you have to work day and night for you to make a lot of money. But then to what end? Like, how long are you going to keep this up also? Diba? So it's really just, it's really a matter of like just internalizing or taking a moment with yourself and knowing like, why exactly are you doing this? And maybe what are you doing this for? That in. So let's say, for example, either whether or not they're in a single income stream or, you know, they have multiple streams, like how do you suggest someone in their 30s or 40s to balance their short-term saving goals? For example, like if they want to go on a vacation, if they want a new car, if they want a new gadget, with long-term goals in terms of like, you know, retirement, buying house, buying a vacation home. How do you suggest like they would manage that?
Yes, I love this question because I always believe there has to be a balance of like, yes, short-term goals would be like, I want to travel to this, travel to that. And then it can be all that. Like, it can't be just like the next 10 years, you're just serving your travels. Like it has to be balanced with how can I also protect my future? How can I feel secure about my future? And that's where like retirement plans come in. And so it has to be creating that balance with your finances of, so connect natin ulit with the life stage. So, because it could go both ways eh. Sometimes may clients ako na they're so anxious about retirement. Sobra sila mag-save sa retirement. Di sila nakapag-enjoy. So parang, what's the point? Like, so for example, that scenario, I teach them, I guide them, okay, when it comes to your income, how can we balance it out? Now you have money to enjoy, and at the same time, you still have like proper pacing with your retirement, investing for your retirement. So another example could be, puro naman enjoy, pero wala namang nasasave sa retirement. So it has to be, it also depends on the age in a way that, okay, I'm thinking of an example of a client na, okay, so for example, I have a client na doctor siya, and then sabi niya na, I've seen how expensive it can be when you get hospitalized. And so he's like, I really want to make sure that my health insurance, the coverage would be higher. Okay, so from there, mas intentional, why am I gonna increase my insurance coverage versus, sabi kasi ng FA ko, taasan ko daw eh. Parang, bakit? Like, for what, again, going back to for what purpose? So I always challenge my clients like that na, for what purpose? Like, what's your intention behind that? Because when you're clear about the intention, you're gonna be excited to do it, not dread it. Sorry. Oh my gosh, like I have like insurance payments again. Like, and that's a common thing, like that you dread your insurance payments because you're like, I don't really see how it's gonna benefit me. So it has to go back to when you set those goals. So for example, a short-term goal would be like travel. For example, for me, like travel with my husband to New York. Like last year, that was my goal. That was my short-term goal. And then I have a long-term goal of making sure that I save higher for my lump sum property because that's gonna be like our forever investment. Like eventually, that's gonna appreciate in value. And at the same time, ma-maintain ko pa rin yung tinatabi ko for my retirement investment. And so that's how I guide my clients in a way na I guide them with like a criteria of like, how does that balance look like to you? Not based on what my parents said, what my FA said, what my lola said. Dapat may insurance ka na as early as now. Yung mga ganong like blind investing or like blindly saving. And so there has to be a clear criteria for you of how does that balance look like. For some people, they don't even want to travel. They just want to collect watches or like play video games. Like my husband, I say that as an example. That's his thing. I'm like, go do that thing as long as we're saving consistently together for our property and for our retirement. So it's fine. So you have to identify how balance looks like to you so that you can set clear short-term goals and long-term goals for retirement.
Okay. Things are starting to make sense now. And I hope for monsters listening, it is starting to make sense for them too. And I love that you brought your husband, or you mentioned your husband also, because we are going to talk about the differences between men and women when it comes to, finances. So first of all, like what are like the top things that you would observe from male clients and female clients, like what they usually save up for? So, and what do they prioritize?
This is so interesting. I was thinking about it. I'm like, is it so different? I'm thinking because I feel like it doesn't. I think the difference in priorities doesn't have to be based on gender. Like it can just be. We just all have different priorities and different desires. I think it's more of may difference yan kapag couple na kayo. I think that's where you have to resolve those differences. Kasi like, let's say if you're just an individual, go do your thing. But for example, if you're now going to live with a partner, you have to acknowledge those differences so that you won't clash. So like, for example, again, like I don't understand why my husband just likes watches. I'm like, you just have one arm to put the watches. Like, I don't know why you want to collect them.
True.
In the same way, my husband's like, I can't believe you're spending 100,000 on a course, but it's for my business. He doesn't get that. I'm going to go on a solo Bali retreat, and he's like, why are you going to spend so much on that? I'd rather spend on a watch, right? And so that kind of differences, we acknowledge that we don't judge na parang, dapat di ka na bumibili niyan. Dapat di mo na ginagastosan yan. Because ultimately, that's part of enjoying the balance nga of the now. Pero at the same time, meron kaming commonalities of like, okay, we have different interests, pero we have mutual goals of like, we're saving for this property. Or we want to make sure that we are preparing for our old age also. So I think it's good to acknowledge the differences in priorities as long as wala namang nasa sacrifice financially. Like, wala namang financially, like, detrimental thing involved.
Right.
Because I feel like we can't expect as a couple na you're both gonna have everything the same kahit na madami kayong common interests. So that's how I would see when you become a couple. Like, ako nakita ko, like, when I was by myself, I just do my thing. Pero when you live with someone, when you have a partner, whether boyfriend or husband or spouse, I think it's important to sit down about that. So that walang judgment na parang, ba't mo ginagastusan yan? Bakit di ka pa mas nagsisave about this? Ganyan. So I think that's a takeaway for me, is just having transparent conversations with your partner so that you both cheer for each other with what you spend on and align on what you need to save up for.
And so I also want to ask then, because since you are husband and wife already, and you are both investing in, a property and whatever else it may be, how do you know like how much you're supposed to put in? Is it like how much you can put in at the time? And like, how do you build an understanding on that and not keep yourself from resenting the other na parang, I made a deposit like much more than you did last time. So parang, so how do you go through that?
Yes. You know what? I love this because I'd say that this kind of dynamic we've always had this when we were preparing for our wedding pa lang. So we aligned. Okay, we have to be, again, getting clear. Ano ba yung outcome na gusto natin? This is our wedding. How much is it gonna be? Okay, if it's gonna be this much, let's work backwards. How much do we need to save together? Right? So para may walang what do you call that? Yung sabi mo na parang, ako, ito, ganito. Walang competitive there. Walang competitive nature. It's more of, let's work as a team. Like, how do we get to this end goal to fund our wedding, for example? So, nangyayari na yun, bago pa kami magsimula, we align na. Well, I sit down with them, like, this is what's gonna happen. Parang I created like a roadmap na, like a spreadsheet of like, this is how much we need to save every month to get to our wedding, for example. So in the same way, ganun din yung in-apply ko when we agreed to get this property. Okay, by X year, we need to have X amount as lump sum. So that means in the next X years, we need to save this much so that by this year, ready na tayo dun sa lump sum. And so I sit with him and show like, ito yung potential savings that we need to have monthly. And then we check on each other, like, is that doable? Is that realistic? Ganyan. So that before we even start giving the amount, wala nang emotional charge. It's just a neutral thing na, I gave this amount as a savings. Okay, I'll give mine this day or whatever. So I always just bring that up na it's good to align before it happens so that when it happens, hindi yung, Bakit kailangan ganon? Or like, bakit ganyan? Wala nang questions. So that walang potential arguments or walang potential disagreements. And so that's how I look at it. Na start with what's the end goal in mind? And how can you work backwards from there so that you know how much both of you are gonna save together.
Okay. All right. And this is pertaining naman to like to separately men and women as well. And this is with regard to risk. Some are more risk averse, some aren't. Do you see this difference between men and women? Like, are men more risk takers or more risk averse, and same for women?
I would say, I don't know if I could statistically, based on how I've coached my clients, I wouldn't say I could give a percentage, but from what I've noticed, men that I've coached, usually they tell me that they struggle with they're too risky. Like, I've taken so much risks that it has depleted my savings, or like, I've masyado akong risk taker na sa investment na to, sa business na to, na I've drained my savings. So I think parang may nakikita ko ganong commonality, I'd say, versus sa mga females that I've coached, it's more of I'm scared to take a risk. So they hold on to money so tight na parang I don't want to do that. Like, what if I go back from zero, I go back to scratch? So I'd say medyo opposites in a way nga, na parang males are more like I do all the risks, and then females are like I'm scared to take the risk. Ano, syempre, may mga times din naman na it becomes interchangeable. May mga iba din na, may mga males din ako nako-coach na I wanna start a business pero I'm scared to take that risk. May ganun din naman. Pero, so, from that, it's understanding what got them there. So, like, for example, dun sa, I always take risks. Like, why? Like, why? Where's that coming from? Like, always wanting to, like, get the adrenaline of taking that risk. Like, and oftentimes it's wanting to prove something. Wanting to prove I can be successful. Wanting to prove I'm better than everyone. Wanting to prove that I can be the best, you know? So, yung mga ganong kind of, like, limiting thoughts, and versus the females na, I'm scared to take a risk because what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if when I get there, I'm not ready for that kind of success? So, yung mga ganun na dynamics that needs to be acknowledged para it doesn't happen again. It doesn't become a cycle of financial mistakes again.
Okay. So in order for us to mitigate, like, you know, how we deal with risk, it's really, again, going to the root of, like, what's causing this particular aversion or I guess, what do you call that? Attraction to risk. So we are nearing actually the end of the show, but before we go, what would you say for someone who's looking to become financially independent in their 40s, and what key steps, or let's say 30s and then 40s, so that we have a wider range for our listeners, depending on who's listening? What key steps would you advise that they should take in the next 3 to 5 years?
Okay. This could be like a whole episode in itself. I'm like, oh my gosh, wait. Dahil ko pwede sabihin. Okay. Because I always benchmark like my clients. So I'm trying to see like, okay. I think number one would be, if you don't feel like you're financially independent yet by 30 or 40, oh yeah, because I realize I do have clients na 40 plus then, and they still go through like that struggle. So first, number one is like, kasi by this age, you've been earning for years. And usually you've hit a point na parang, ay, like I've been earning so much, like where is it going? Like how come I don't see the fruits, or like I don't see myself as financially secure despite earning for years? And so number one is acknowledging what's been holding you back to be financially independent. Is it your spending habits? Is it you being so risk averse? Like, is it you being an overgiver? Is it being an impulsive spender? Is it being an anxious spender? Like, what is exactly the habit or the fear that's been holding you back to be financially independent? Because from there, we want to solve the root cause of that. We want to solve the root cause, so that it doesn't become this like recurring cycle of debts, recurring cycle of saving blindly, recurring cycle of money anxiety. So that's number one, is finding out what that thing that's been holding you back financially, and how can you solve the root cause of that. And again, it goes back to like the things that we talked about, is like really understanding that every money problem is just a symptom of an underlying root problem. Like we think that it's just impulsive buying, but there's like Meron pa tayong ihukay dun sa
Yeah.
ilalim. Like from childhood and things like that. So that's that. Because believe it or not, I realized na when I have my clients na 40 plus, they still carry those unmet needs from childhood. Can you imagine? Like they're already 40 plus and they're like, oh my gosh, they couldn't believe that they still carried it to this day. And when they were able to acknowledge and therefore forgive themselves and release that, they get to be like, oh, I get to be truly free from being held back by those financial mistakes and feel wiser now to make the best money decisions for my future. So that's that. Solving the root cause of your unhealthy spending habits or your money problems. Number two is now being able to identify what do I truly want that I want to prioritize in the next 3 to 5 years. Like what is that exactly for me? Because at this point, I would say from what I've seen, they've just been following like probably a dream life that's not theirs. Like they've just been like living a life that's not theirs.
Yeah.
And so it's time to like sit down and reflect and check in with themselves na, is this really where I want my life to go? If not, where do I want to go? Like all my life I thought I was going to Baguio, but then I actually want to be in Bulacan. Yung ganon, parang, and it's fine. Then it's okay to change your mind. Because most of the time sa age na to, meron ng judgment to yourself na I can't change my mind. I'm old. Like I'm not getting any younger. Like I can't pivot or I can't suddenly like move to a whole different direction. But it's okay. Like rather than you regret when you're 60, right?
Yeah.
There's that. And then third is now going into the practical side of things is looking at how can you now therefore align your finances, your income right now to that direction that you want to go so that you don't have another 6 months of wondering where the hell did my money go, like what, yung ganon. And so being able to tailor fit your financial system to those life goals, to those life stage, so that it becomes exciting for you to stick to a system instead of dread it, instead of punishing yourself for it. So I feel like that's always the start because I believe that building sustainable money habits is the foundational skill for any financial freedom. It has to be there so that eventually when they earn more, they know how to manage that extra money instead of see that money as extra money to burn. So there. And then they can also watch my YouTube and TikTok for more free resources. Because I feel like baka maging 2 hours na tayo dito if I keep
No naman. But thank you so much, Nick, for taking the time today and sharing your insight and your knowledge as well on how we can better manage our finances for 2025, and that we also don't carry the weight of other people's like expectations of how we should be managing our finances. And so before we go, please do tell us where Monsters can find you. And also if you have that program that's happening, I think it's like a 2 month program, something that you usually do, go ahead and share it.
Yeah, so for free resources, they can go to Instagram, YouTube, and it's really a place for you to finally dig deep in resolving that root cause of what's been holding you back to be financially independent and to be financially free. So they can just check out my website at coachingwithnik.com for all of that, or they can message me on Instagram and we can chat more about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick, and best of luck to you as well and your goals and your also your finances as well, because we're all gonna try and manage our finances as best we can following this episode. So thank you so much, and for Monsters who are listening, thank you for keeping it locked. We will be back for more episodes next week. For now, keep it locked only here on the Monster. Bye.
Join in, hear it out. Heard on Thursdays. Be part of the conversation. Intelligent and fun exchange of information.